Hello, Dreadfuls. I'm Jean.
And I'm Derek.
And welcome back to the Dr. Dread podcast, where we talk about all things unusual, unsettling, and unexplained. And today we just fall under the category of unusual. I've got something a little different for you today, Derek.
Okay.
Today we're going to be talking about two very unlikely advocates for our First Amendment freedom of expression that we enjoy here in the United States.
Huh. Okay, then.
Not what you were expecting?
Definitely not.
Okay. Well, before we get to who these champions of our First Amendment rights are, we need to understand a little bit about our First Amendment freedom of expression and what it is. And I'm going to nerd out on you guys for a second. I'm going to read you a quote from Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes from his dissenting opinion in United States versus Schwimmer from 1929. Oliver Wendell Holmes is largely considered the father of our modern thinking on the First Amendment. So here it is. He says, if there is any principle of the Constitution that more imperatively calls for attachment than any other, it is the principle of free thought. Not free thought for those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought that we hate.
Huh.
What do you think that means?
To be honest, I have no clue.
That is a very Supreme Court justice way of saying that if we truly are going to do this freedom of speech thing that we have in America, then we have to do it right. And doing it right means we have to allow freedom of speech for everybody, not just the people we agree with, not just the people whose opinions we like. If it's going to actually mean anything, it has to be extended to everyone.
That makes sense. You know, today I thought we were going to be talking about bodies, but no, we're talking about the First Amendment.
Well, there will be a body later.
Oh, okay then.
There will be a body in a story that we get to associated with this stuff later. So don't worry, I'm not leaving the bodies out.
Well, that's cool then.
I'm glad you think that's cool. And keep that word in mind, cool. That's going to come up later too.
Huh.
So, our First Amendment, as it's written in our Bill of Rights to the Constitution, says, Congress shall make no law respecting an established religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Just in case you've never actually heard the language of our First Amendment, that's it. And the part we're going to be focusing on today is that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. That's the part we're focusing on today.
Okay then.
Now, of course, there are exceptions to our freedom of speech. It's not absolute. There are exceptions. One of those exceptions being defamation, meaning you can't intentionally say things about another person that you know to be false, or that if you had done your due diligence, you would know that they are false.
How can you prove it?
What do you mean, how can you prove it?
Somebody's talking shit about somebody. How can you prove defamation?
It depends on what they say, how you'd go about proving it.
Fair enough.
But yes, there are rules against defamation. You cannot say things about people that you know not to be true. And of course, our freedom of speech does not protect against fraud for obvious reasons.
That makes sense.
Also, fighting words intended to provoke another person to violence. Those are not protected.
Well, that one's pretty obvious.
Yes. Also, true threats, statements that express a serious intent to commit unlawful acts of violence. Again, common sense on that one.
Yeah.
Also, speech that is integral to criminal conduct, meaning speech that is part of committing criminal acts. You can't go commit a crime, like fraud, and then claim that the things you said to commit said fraud are part of your freedom of speech.
Oh.
Yeah, that doesn't work. And school disruption, speech that creates disruption or threatens to disrupt a school's functioning, is obviously not protected. School is a whole special area where our freedom of speech is not as liberally applied as it is in other places. But there is purpose behind that. The purpose of school is to educate our youth.
Well,
and we don't want disruption of that.
Never mind.
And lastly, obscenity. The production or distribution of, quote, obscene materials. And that's the one that's going to come into play with what we're talking about.
Ooh.
Yes.
It- I think I know what you might be talking about.
You think you have some idea of where I'm going with this?
Yes. Yes, I have some idea.
All right. Well, we need to understand just a few more things before we actually get into what we're talking about today. Now, when challenges of whether your First Amendment freedom of speech is brought up, there are different levels of scrutiny that can be applied to whether the government actually is infringing on your freedom of speech or not.
Ooh.
And the one that's really going to be at play here today is strict scrutiny, which is applied to content-based laws, meaning laws that seek to regulate speech based on what you're actually talking about, not about the manner in which it's being conveyed, but laws focused on regulating what you are saying.
So what you are saying is a big factor.
Yes, that is the important one in strict scrutiny. And now, under strict scrutiny, the government has to prove that whatever law is restricting your speech is narrowly tailored in the interest of advancing a compelling governmental interest, and that the law is the least restrictive means of serving that interest. So, obviously, we have to know what a compelling governmental interest is.
Talking about military secrets.
Well, that is actually the first one that has been noted as always being a compelling governmental interest is, yes, national security. Obvious reasons there.
Yeah, the military don't want you to talk about their secrets.
Yes, they don't want you spilling their secrets. National security, for obvious reasons, is a compelling governmental interest. Also, ensuring basic human rights for members of groups that have been historically subjected to discrimination. Don't be racist.
So the first one reminds me of something because people who actually were huge fans of this game called War Thunder. It's like a game where they have like military vehicles they can use to fight other people.
Uh-huh.
There's a few people that like that game in the military, in the US military, and they link government documents to them so they can make it accurate to the planes.
Oh, you mean they leaked military specifications for like aircraft and stuff to the game manufacturers?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and then the game manufacturers put out a tweet saying, "We do not want government documents. This is not a joke."
Yeah, that is not a joke because that would fall under the category of national security, and that would not be protected under their First Amendment right to free speech. Yeah, they could get in very much trouble for that.
Yeah. A few countries had the same issue too.
Oh, so people from different countries have tried to do this too.
Yeah.
Wow, and what game was this?
War Thunder.
I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, it's a pretty competitive game.
The people from the military who play it want their vehicles to be accurate. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That is some dedication to a game that you would risk that kind of trouble for yourself. But okay.
I didn't believe it at first, but when I looked it up, it was true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, let's continue with things that are compelling governmental interests that can allow the government to regulate our freedom of speech. Where did we go? I accidentally pressed the button and I moved my notes and I didn't mean to. There we go. Eradicating discrimination against female citizens. Don't be sexist. Depriving criminals of the profits of their crimes and using these funds to compensate victims. So, Ken, you can't engage in white-collar crime and claim freedom of speech in protecting you from your crime and then get to keep any profits from your crime.
Okay, then.
Yes. And then finally, protecting the physical and psychological well-being of minors. And this is the one that's going to come into play with what we're talking about today.
Oh, golly. I think I know where we're going.
Yes. You probably know where we're going at this point. So if you're using the strict scrutiny test, meaning the government has to have a compelling interest and use the least restrictive means to regulate your free speech, usually you use what's called the clear and present danger test, meaning that the speech must pose a real and imminent threat of substantive evil.
Okay.
Meaning that there must be an identifiable and present imminent danger from the use of that speech. Basically, the danger is present and it's going to happen right now. The example we always used in law school for clear and present danger was yelling fire in a crowded theater.
Well,
the danger of yelling fire in a crowded theater is evident. If you do that, people are going to panic, they're going to rush for the exits, and people could get hurt or killed trying to get out of a theater where there is no fire and there is no danger.
And yeah, that made sense.
Yes. So there are other tests that go into regulations on freedom of speech, but those are the ones that are going to be important for what we're talking about.
All right.
So, in the 1990s, there was a campaign for, quote, decency in television programming that reflected, wow, we'll pretend I can talk, reflected broader cultural and political movements aimed at addressing concerns over a perceived rise in indecency, violence, and negative moral influences in popular media.
Oh, I know where we're going.
Yeah, you think you know where we're going?
I have a strong feeling I know where we're going.
Yes. So, yes, and people in the 1990s saw heightened concerns about the impact of media on society values, driven by a perceived rise in violent crimes, especially in youth, more school shootings, and sensationalized media coverage of these events. And they largely placed the blame on shows like Beavis and Butthead, The Simpsons, Married with Children, even the Power Rangers.
I know where we go.
And shows like Jerry Springer.
I just don't understand how Power Rangers could be a bad influence.
Yeah, no, I will talk a little bit about the Power Rangers more later, because some of the things they brought up specifically, and some of the things we talk about, the stuff they say they want being programmed to children, it's like you are literally describing the Power Rangers.
Oh.
And yet they cited Power Rangers as, quote, too violent.
How is Power Rangers too violent? You had Tommy.
Yeah, we will get to that in a minute. But yes, the key issues of concern were violence. Shows with violent or even cartoonish depictions of violence were criticized for encouraging aggressive behavior in children. And it was mainly Beavis and Butthead, wrestling. In the 1990s, was it WWE yet, or was it still WWF? You're better at wrestling than I am.
It was WWF, I think. I think they changed WWE once they went into the late 2000s, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, yeah, you know wrestling better than I do, so I'll take your word on that. But yeah, it was mostly Beavis and Butthead wrestling, and the Power Rangers were cited as their concerns for violence.
Which makes no sense. It does not. It made zero sense. I don't understand.
Yeah, the Power Rangers does not make sense, but we will get to that, more on that in a minute. Also, sexual conduct. Programs like Married with Children and certain soap operas were criticized for suggestive humor and innuendos that they used in their jokes.
Okay.
And then also crude and anti-authoritarian messages. The Simpsons, specifically Bart Simpson and Beavis and Butthead, were accused of promoting disrespect for authority figures and fostering a lack of discipline in the youth.
Well, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about it, but it's like, okay, it's just a TV show.
Yes, exactly. It's just a TV show. So, organizations like the Parents Television Council and the American Family Association began lobbying for cleaner programming, particularly during the hours when children were likely to be watching.
This is dumb.
Yes, and they frequently cited studies on the prevalence of violent or indecent content in TV shows with issues, and often issued public ratings with a, quote, worst offender list.
What?
And of course, always on this worst offender list were Beavis and Butthead, who are our unlikely champions of our First Amendment right to free speech.
Yeah, you're probably right. I love that show. That show is just amazing.
Yes, Beavis and Butthead is hilarious. If you're not familiar, a Beavis and Butthead is a TV show created by Mike Judge, which aired on MTV starting in 1993. It was an animated series following two teenage boys, Beavis and Butthead, known for their crude humor, rebellious antics, and often inappropriate and frankly stupid behavior.
I mean, that's a fair assumption of them. But you know what? They picked good music. They had good music taste.
They had good taste in music. I can give Beavis and Butthead that. They had good taste in music. But yes, what a lot of people I think missed about Beavis and Butthead and the critics of Beavis and Butthead is that they were very obviously meant to be caricatures and parodies of 90s teenagers.
Yeah, I could tell. I mean, my favorite episode probably has to be the tire episode.
Oh, yes. Describe the tire episode for everyone who does not know the infamous tire episode of Beavis and Butthead.
I can't remember who it is, but one of them rolled each other down a hill in a tire. So one of them was in a tire, and they just started, and one of them just kept rolling and rolling and rolling.
Yes, that was Beavis. Beavis got in the tire, Butthead pushed him down a hill, and the rest of the episode is Beavis rolling in the tire,
Across the highway.
causing mayhem wherever he goes.
Yeah, across the highway into a parking lot. I think they hit like a car or something.
Yes, he caused wrecks when the tire crossed the highway, people trying to avoid hitting him. Hit cars in a parking lot, ran over his teacher while his teacher was out trying to do nature photography. There were a few other things that happened, but yeah.
Just for YouTube's sake, nobody died that I know of.
Yeah, nobody died, no, but yes, it was funny. Mayhem ensued.
Well, you know, when they brought up wrestling, we're going to go back to wrestling for a second. When they brought up wrestling, the main factors that I think they brought up was like The Undertaker and Kane. Those are probably two big factors.
Probably.
Because Undertaker in the 90s was doing his like cult gimmick of the version of himself, and then they had a segment where they took his logo and tried to sacrifice Vince McMahon's daughter.
I've never seen that one, but that's hilarious. But even me, who was not allowed to watch wrestling growing up, I still knew about The Undertaker because when I was in elementary school, I heard the boys in my class talking about The Undertaker, and they were trying to do the Undertaker thing where they rolled their eyes into the back of their head like The Undertaker does.
Don't worry, YouTube. Stephanie did not die. Stone Cold saved the day.
Thank God for Stone Cold.
You know, Vince McMahon put his daughter in a lot of weird situations. Like, he said, okay, you're going to go lay on that cross and they're going to hang you a few feet up in the air, and Undertaker's going to look like he's about to sacrifice you. Then Stone Cold's going to save the day.
Yeah, that sounds like something that the parents of the 90s would have complained about. And what you just described there is probably why I wasn't allowed to watch wrestling growing up.
It's just The Undertaker.
Yeah, it's just The Undertaker. That's just what he does. But yes, that's probably why my mom did not want me watching wrestling.
And then you can't forget about the Inferno matches where they had fire across the ring, and then how you won the match was setting the other person on fire.
It's funny that you bring up fire, because that's how Beavis and Butthead came to the forefront of the whole decency in media and violence in media programming issue.
Well, I mean, WWE was doing it first.
They were, but fire is how Beavis and Butthead came to the forefront of everything.
And also, YouTube, don't worry, nobody died in the ring.
Yes, wrestling is all staged. Nobody actually dies. Except for a few times when they actually did.
Oh, okay, we can't say that. I'm just going to say this. Nobody in those instances I brought up died.
There you go.
There we go. We cleared our name.
Okay. So Beavis and Butthead became the focal point for the whole decency and violence in television thing in October of 1993. In Moraine, Ohio, a 5-year-old boy, Austin Messner, accidentally set fire to his family's mobile home using a cigarette lighter.
Holy shit.
And tragically, his 2-year-old sister, Jessica, was unable to escape and died in the fire.
What?
And after this happened, the boy's mother, Darla Messner, alleged, months after this happened, mind you, but she still alleged, that Beavis and Butthead influenced her son's activities, particularly the show's frequent references to fire, Beavis yelling, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" Yes.
That's a pretty famous line from him.
Yes, that's a Beavis staple. But yes, the mother claimed that Austin had watched one of those episodes where Beavis was excited about fire shortly before the house burned down.
He's also the great Cornholio.
Beavis is also the great Cornholio, but that's not what they were concerned about. They were concerned about his fire antics.
Well, you know, I don't think he's ever burned the building down, so I think his name is clear.
No, Beavis did not burn down any buildings, I don't think. But yes, the mother of this child, Austin, and Jessica, the one who died, claimed that was why Austin was playing with the lighter and burned down their mobile home. But neighbors claimed that the family didn't even have cable television.
Ooh.
At the time. And remember, this is in 1993. This is pre-YouTube. This is pre-streaming services. The only place that they would have been able to see it was on MTV, which was running on cable.
Do you know how bad MTV is now?
I know. MTV now is a travesty.
I mean, that one dude, I don't remember his name. I don't remember his show's name, but there was like a whole 72 hours of them just showing that dude's one show.
MTV was a travesty 15 years ago, and it's even worse now.
Yeah, MTV's awful now.
Yeah.
It peaked in the 90s.
Yes, when Beavis and Butthead was on. But after this fire incident in Ohio, the media, of course, it received widespread media coverage, and because the mother said that it was Beavis and Butthead who were the cause of it, many media outlets began linking Beavis and Butthead to the boys' actions. And of course, this just fueled more critics arguing that the show's content glorified dangerous behavior and appealed to young children, despite MTV's claims that Beavis and Butthead was, of course, intended for older audiences.
Well, you know what'd be funny if they interviewed the kid and they asked, "Do you know who Beavis and Butthead is?"
Oh, we have a later quote from him.
Oh,
yes.
You know what'd be funny? He said, "Who the hell is Beavis and Butthead?"
No. He didn't say that, but here's what he did have to say. In 2008, so Austin was 20 years old at the time.
Oh.
He actually came forward and said, "I literally never saw the cartoon. How could I? It was 1993. My mom was a drug addict. We couldn't afford cable."
This is an actual quote.
This is an actual quote from this guy.
Holy shit!
Yes, they did not have cable. He said he never saw Beavis and Butthead, and he also said that he has never watched Beavis and Butthead and has no interest in watching it.
What the fuck? I can't watch Beavis and Butthead because my parent is a drug addict.
That's what he said. Remember, 1993, the only way you were watching Beavis and Butthead is if you had access to cable.
And nobody look into this woman's personal life. I mean,
apparently she was a drug addict and they did not have cable.
Well, you know, they should have just did a little digging into this woman's personal life because Aria Red Flag, she lives in an RV in Ohio. I mean, those are two big red flags.
Oh, don't hate on Ohio too much.
Oh, crazy things happen in Ohio. I heard you don't come back the same.
I apologize to anyone listening who might be in Ohio. We don't really hate Ohio.
I don't really hate Ohio. I just hear stories. So if anybody's listening that's from Ohio, please tell me what goes on there.
But yeah, I mean, we have from his own mouth that no, he does not recall watching Beavis and Butthead growing up. It was not the reason he decided to play with the lighter. And yet the media just ran with it and took off with that story. So MTV, they're obviously facing a lot of public criticism over this. So MTV decided to remove all references to fire from any subsequent episodes and airings of the original episodes where Beavis was screaming fire. And they also moved Beavis and Butthead from its 7 p.m. time slot to 10 p.m., so it would be less likely that young children would be watching it.
This is dumb.
Well, they felt like they had to act. And also, episodes referencing fire were cut from the earlier episodes. They altered the original master tapes of the earlier episodes with Beavis yelling about fire. Mike Judge himself said in an interview that was included in the Mike Judge collection DVD set of Beavis and Butthead that he doesn't know whether some of the earlier episodes still exist in their original uncensored form. So the only place they may now exist is if somebody had been taping those original recordings when they were originally broadcast and has now uploaded them somewhere.
Hey, if anybody has those that are listening, I kind of want to see them. I'm a huge fan of Beavis and Butthead, so
yes,
those tapes would be historic.
Yes, so if you do happen to have some of those very early episodes where Beavis freely screams "fire, fire, fire," yes, you have a gold mine.
Yeah, you could sell that for some money.
And also, it's unknown for certain whether this was coincidence or in response to the fire incident. But around that same time, MTV started airing a new disclaimer at the start of each Beavis and Butthead episode, warning children not to imitate Beavis and Butthead. Again, the exact date this disclaimer began airing is unknown, but it was at least as early, if not earlier, than the fire incident.
So you're telling me this is like some jackass stuff?
Yes, and here's a script of what the disclaimer says. You know, they just ran text on the screen for the disclaimer, but here's what it said. Beavis and Butthead are not role models. They're not even human. They're cartoons. Some of the things they do would cause a person to get hurt, expelled, arrested, possibly deported. To put it another way, don't try this at home.
Possibly deported?
They are referring to one of Beavis's Cornholio episodes.
Possibly deported.
Yes, they are referring to one of Beavis's Cornholio episodes. If you aren't familiar with Beavis and Butthead, every time Beavis consumes too much sugar, he pulls the back of his shirt up over his head and sticks his arms out at his sides at right angles and yells, "I am Cornholio!" and then starts saying really bizarre stuff.
Yeah, he started a cult with that.
Yes, there is an episode where he started a cult being Cornholio. But the episode I'm referring to is Beavis and Butthead were at their job at Burger World working, and he drank too much soda, so he turned into Cornholio. And then a Border Patrol agent happened to come in, and Beavis was just spouting nonsense. And the Border Patrol agent thought he was speaking some bizarre form of Spanish and that he had crossed the border. And so they took him and put him on the bus to deport him to Mexico.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
The stuff that Mike Judge wrote is just impeccable.
The name of the episode is Via Con Cornholio.
Thank you. Yes, that was Rick. Thank you, Rick. That is my husband and our producer for our Dr. Dread podcast. Yes, thank you. In case you're curious, that episode is Via Con Cornholio.
You really can't make this up.
No, you can't make this up.
This can't air now.
But Beavis and Butthead did not take the prohibition against fire laying down. The creators found a censorship loophole and took delight in making Beavis scream things that sounded like fire. Like one episode where they're working at Burger World again, Beavis gets angry at the French frying machine for whatever reason and is yelling, "Fryer, fryer!" So he's not yelling fire, he's yelling fryer.
Fryer, not fire.
And then there's another episode where Butthead calls Beavis a liar, and Beavis goes, "Liar, liar, liar, pants on." Whoa. So he stopped himself before he says liar, liar, pants on fire. But you all know where he was going.
I remember that one.
Yes.
And then you can't forget about the best episode. It has nothing to do with fire, but the choke episode.
The choke episode. That one is a classic in this house because that one always makes Rick fall over laughing. He's laughing just thinking about that episode right now.
I think it was Beavis was choking on chicken.
That episode is literally called Choke. And no, it was Butthead. Beavis and Butthead were eating a bucket of chicken, and Butthead started choking on one of the pieces of chicken. And so his first hurdle is having to convince Beavis to call 911 for him. Yes, you see the effect Beavis and Butthead has in our household. You're laughing. Rick's laughing. You two are making me.
It did the 9-1 up.
I'm trying to tell the people who maybe haven't seen it about the episode.
And then the 911 operator asks, "Have you performed the Heimlich maneuver?"
Yes. And Beavis doesn't know what that is, and he says, "Have I licked his rectum? No way!" Yes. So the operator tells him he has to perform the Heimlich maneuver. Beavis doesn't know what the Heimlich maneuver is. The 911 operator tells him every restaurant has a sign describing the Heimlich maneuver. So all this time, Butthead is still choking.
He's turned like blue now.
Yes, he's like purple at this point. And Beavis decides he has to go walk to Burger World and find the sign describing the Heimlich maneuver. And the whole time, Butthead is still choking. And Beavis finally gets back. He has the wrong sign. He has the sign that says employees need to wash their hands before returning to work.
Yeah.
And he happens to step on Butthead, and that, because Butthead has fallen to the floor at this point, he happens to step on Butthead, and that dislodges the chicken from his throat.
And then, who was it? I think Beavis, but no, I can't remember.
Yeah, the episode ends with Beavis seeing the coughed, puked up chicken that had gotten stuck in Butthead's throat, and decides to eat it himself, and he starts choking, and that's the end of the episode.
Yeah. The greatest episode of all time. You can't beat that one. There's no way you can beat that one.
No, that is one of their absolutely classic episodes. But yes, but back to the whole censorship and disdain against Beavis and Butthead for promoting dangerous activity in the youth. They actually made an episode directly making fun of this whole scenario.
Really?
Yes, they did. So this episode starts out with Beavis and Butthead flipping through TV channels, as they often do, looking for something interesting to watch, and they come across a Ben Franklin documentary.
Oh, I think I know which one this is.
About Ben Franklin. And they get to the part where Ben Franklin takes the kite and the string and the key, and he's trying to test his hypothesis that lightning is actually electricity. So they watch the documentary about Ben Franklin doing this, and then they notice that there's a thunderstorm outside.
Yep.
So get the kite, Beavis. Yeah, that is what Butthead says. Get the kite, Beavis. So they go outside with the kite, trying to recreate the Ben Franklin experiment. And of course, they get themselves hit by lightning.
Yeah.
As you would expect. So they're in the hospital, and a news reporter comes to interview them because she's, "Oh, well, I heard you boys were imitating something you saw on TV."
Yep.
And and tries to insinuate that it was Howard Stern or some other sort of programming. And she even looks through the TV guide, because remember, this is back in the era of you just had to go by whatever the TV stations decided to run. So you had TV guides that would tell you when things were coming on TV.
Well, you still do now.
The news reporter looked in the TV guide to see what they were watching, and of course she happens upon the Ben Franklin story, and she goes, "No, couldn't possibly." Even though that is exactly what they were watching and imitating.
Yep.
So, yes, Beavis and Butthead did not take the whole, you are responsible for violence among children thing lying down. They made fun of it at every opportunity they could.
Yeah, and then they had the pipe episode.
Yes, the pipe episode.
I'm just thinking of good Beavis and Butthead episodes.
That's another good one. Yep. For some reason, they end up wandering around a construction site. Butthead crawls into a pipe for some reason. I don't remember why, and he gets stuck.
Yep.
That's the whole episode. Is the chaos that ensues trying to get Butthead out of the pipe.
Yeah. So where were we now? I was just laughing about 5 minutes ago.
So we just got through with MTV and Beavis and Butthead's reaction to all the criticism against them. Oh, but it goes further than that. It goes further than that. In the early 1990s, U.S. Congress actually had hearings about violence in programming on TV, and Beavis and Butthead was specifically mentioned.
Really?
Oh, yes. Specifically, Senator Ernest Fritz Hollings from South Carolina, in comments to Attorney General Janet Reno during a hearing in 1993 about violent programming in television, had some things to say about Beavis and Butthead. I do have a clip of that here.
I know what you're talking about.
I have that here if you'd like to hear it.
I've heard this a million times, but it's still funny.
Oh, yes. So here
the TV is the most pervasive terror. It's called a narcotic, but the truth of the matter is, and we've got to acknowledge it, it's the most pervasive.
This actually aired.
All children see. We got this, was it Buffcoat and Beaver or Beaver and something else? They had. I haven't seen it. I don't watch it, but whatever it is, it was at 7 o'clock. Buffcoat, and they put it on now at 10:30, I think. They've pleaded guilty, and they'll do it as long as you and I have hearings, but we just can't have hearings like we've had now for 40 years and get nowhere. And yeah, we'll go see the Attorney General, we'll go see the Chairman, we'll go see. We good people, you good people, and we doing it. But the truth of the matter is, it's more and more pervasive, more and more violence on television. Can't we do that? And not really be constitutionally in violation or really hurting, as you and I don't want to do, the First Amendment.
So yeah, that's the infamous Buffcoat and Beaver speech about Beavis and Butthead.
If y'all couldn't hear that, summarize it for them.
Yeah, so if you couldn't tell what he was saying, basically this senator from South Carolina was concerned about violence on TV, and he specifically mentioned Beavis and Butthead, who he admitted he hadn't actually watched the show, so he's relying on a secondhand and hearsay, knowledge about this show. He hasn't actually seen it himself, he admitted, but it's a Buffcoat and Beaver or whatever they're called. It said, well, they moved their show from 7 o'clock to 10:30 at night, so as far as I'm concerned, they've admitted guilty to, whatever being overly violent on TV was supposed to mean.
Yeah. He said Buffcoat and Beaver.
Buffcoat and Beaver. He did not even know the names of Beavis and Butthead. It called them Buffcoat and Beaver. And of course, Beavis and Butthead took the opportunity and made fun of this as well.
Yes, they did.
Oh, yes. Tom Anderson, who's an elderly neighbor of Beavis and Butthead, I think this is in the episode where Beavis and Butthead end up running off with Tom Anderson's riding lawnmower. So, of course, he calls the police, and he's telling the police about Beavis and Butthead, and he says, one of them calls himself Butthole. The other one's name is Joe, I think.
Yep. Butthole and Joe.
And then there's some other episode, I can't remember what it is, but Tom Anderson's back again, and he's talking to somebody about Beavis and Butthead, and he calls them Buffcoat and Beaver.
I think that's Buffcoat and Beaver.
Yeah. So, Mike Judge being Mike Judge, never missed an opportunity to make fun of all of this.
Yeah. This is surprisingly all true. This sounds like a fake story,
I know,
but this is true.
This stuff sounds like it's made up, but it's all true.
All right. I don't even know where we are. I've been laughing so much.
Well, we're in the congressional hearings that they had about violent programming on television and the effects that it has on America's youth.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just a highlight. But then also Janet Reno, in her statement before the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation on their hearing concerning violent programming in 1993, listed a bunch of statistics about all the numbers of hours that children watch of violence and how on Saturday mornings when television programming targets children, that total of violent acts per hour that they see jumps to 20 to 25 instead of just 10 violent acts per hour. These are actual quotes. And of course, these statistics she's citing have no specification on what acts of violence means, whether they're referring to actual actors depicting violence, whether it means cartoon violence, and what actually counts as an act of violence anyway. None of that in those statistics.
So how many acts of violence would be counted if somebody saw a robbery, one of these kids saw a robbery and saw somebody get shot? Would it be 10 or 20?
You mean on TV or in real life?
In real life.
Who knows? Because we can't specify what counts as an act of violence in the first place.
So see, their argument is bullshit.
Yes, the argument is invalid, and I think done in very bad faith.
Yeah, they didn't like Buffcode and Beaver.
Yes, but anyway, here's what I talked about. Remember how they were also angry about the Power Rangers?
Yeah.
And how they said the Power Rangers were too violent? So here's what Janet Reno had to say about the types of programming that she wanted to see television companies run. Simply curbing violent programming would be a very positive step. But what if all television offered more shows with plots that actually repudiated violence? What if parents knew that there was programming available featuring anti-violent themes, the resolution of disputes without resort to violence, and people managing their anger without picking up a gun? Television doesn't have to pretend that violence doesn't exist, but it certainly doesn't have to present it as a solution to a problem. And also, she said, television can help teach children a lot about do's and don'ts, but it has to go beyond that and relate to their world and show them that being an American means they can grow up to be who they want to be and really make a difference, regardless of their circumstances. Television can help restore hope in children for whom hope doesn't come easy by promoting self-respect and esteem, teaching that decisions should be made based on what is right instead of what peers want, and that being different should lead to tolerance and acceptance, and that they should never go near or touch a gun. That is literally describing the Power Rangers.
I literally just heard the Power Rangers plot.
That is describing the Power Rangers. The Power Rangers, if you don't know, from the original Power Rangers from the 90s, they never used guns. When they did have to resort to violence was never a first option, and when they did have to resort to, quote, violence, it was always in the form of martial arts.
Yeah. Or unless they brought out the Megazord.
Yes, unless they brought out their Zords, which were giant robots. And they were never beating up other people. They were beating up invading aliens trying to take over Earth in various strange and unusual ways.
I was going to try to do the voice of the witch woman. I forgot her name.
Oh, Rita Repulsa.
Yeah, I was going to try to do a voice of her, but you know what? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, good luck. I can't do the Rita voice either. But yeah, so the stuff Janet Reno was complaining about is literally the Power Rangers, which just tells me that again, everybody arguing about this violence on television stuff never actually watched the shows that they were complaining about.
They should watch wrestling.
Because especially the stuff about promoting self-respect and esteem, teaching that decisions should be made based on what's right instead of what peers want, that is literally the Power Rangers.
That sounds like some wrestling too. It sounds like John Cena. Kind of. You know,
I don't know much about John Cena, except that he played in that one. What is that one superhero show?
Oh, Peacemaker.
Peacemaker. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was him. You know a lot more about wrestling than I do. Sadly, that's John Cena's been a wrestler for a while, and he was in Peacemaker, and that's about all I can say that I know about John Cena.
Yeah, he's doing his retirement tour now.
Cool.
You know, all I gotta say is, I think they would have lost it if they saw the Stephanie segment that I mentioned earlier in the show about her getting sacrificed on the Undertaker's logo.
Yeah, all I can think of, do you know what year that was?
I think that was 1997.
Okay, so that was a little bit after all of this.
Or I don't know.
Yeah, because this was early 90s. This was like 93 to 95 when this was going on.
You can pull up YouTube and look at it. And you can find out when.
But yeah, that makes sense that it was afterward, because if this had happened, they would have been harping on that too.
Well, I'm surprised they weren't harping on the Undertaker in general, because he's literally a dead man who comes out and just fights.
Yeah, and if the fact that they're telling you that he's literally a dead man getting up and fighting doesn't tell you that it's all make-believe, then I can't help you.
Okay.
As they say today, media literacy.
Okay. Wrestling characters are fake, but them actually doing the stuff hurts.
Okay, yes, that the stuff they actually do is, yeah, the stunts they actually pull are real, and yes, it takes a great deal of athleticism, and a lot of it does hurt. Yes.
Have you seen that ring mat?
Have I seen what?
The ring under the ring mat, like not with the padding?
No.
It's pure wood.
Ouch. Yeah.
And then you have literally rope as the ring ropes. It's pure rope. So
Yeah.
you could get rope burns.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they do. But yeah, in addition to Janet Reno's claims about, what she was looking for in programming rather than, quote, violence, I also thought she was rather disingenuous in that report to the Senate committee, because she claimed that she was not advocating for legislative intervention in media programming, basically not looking for government regulation of free speech, at least not at first. But she did cite the landmark case FCC versus Pacifica Foundation from 1978, where the Supreme Court did set a precedent for upholding the FCC's ban on certain language that it deemed to be indecent from being broadcast over the airwaves.
Yeah.
And this case is funny. This has some funny stuff to it.
Oh, yeah.
Because in 1973, the radio station WBAI in New York ran a program about societal attitudes toward language and included a monologue from a comedian named George Carlin called 7 Words You Can Never Say on Television.
Oh, great.
Yes. So here's, I cannot recite this like George Carlin can. I saw some videos of him doing it. I cannot recite it the way he can. That's why he's a comedian and I'm not. But I'm still going to read a little bit of a small excerpt from this monologue.
Are these words allowed to say now?
This is just a podcast. We can say what we want.
I don't think that holds up. We should be careful here. We got restrictions nowadays.
Okay, this is a podcast. We can say what we want. And if we're playing it on YouTube, you only can't cuss in the first 30 seconds on YouTube. So
these are just cuss words. These are not like slurs or something.
No, these are just cuss words. They're not slurs.
Oh, we're good then.
No. If they were slurs, I wouldn't be saying them. But these are just cuss words.
Just making sure.
Yeah. So here's an excerpt from this 7 words you can never say on television.
All right.
Yeah, there are 400,000 words in the English language, and there are 7 of them that you can't say on television. What a ratio that is. 399,993 to 7. They must be really bad. They have to be outrageous to be separated from a group that large. All of you over here use 7 bad words. That's what they told us you were, remember? That's a bad word. No bad words, bad thoughts, bad intentions, bad words. You know the 7, don't you, that you can't say on television? Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. Those are the heavy 7. Those are the ones that'll infect your soul, curve your spine, and keep the country from winning the war.
Man.
Yes.
I am seasoned over here. These words got me seasoned out.
That's kind of the attitude that people had toward violence and language like that over media. Oh my God, people are going to seize out if we say those words. But there they are. Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits.
This actually aired.
Yes, they actually aired it. That's what got this radio station in trouble with the FCC, because the FCC alleged that this monologue was, quote, patently offensive and also deliberately broadcast at a time when minors could have been listening, both of which were forbidden per the Communications Act of 1934.
But what time was this?
This was in 19...
No, what time frame? Not time frame, but like time slot.
I don't know. I haven't
Did this
found.
air?
I haven't found when it aired, exactly what time. It was just in 1973 is when it aired. But yes, so violation of the Communications Act of 1934, and the Pacifica Foundation, which was the company that owned the radio station, challenged the FCC's decision on that on First Amendment freedom of speech grounds. So it made its way up to the Supreme Court eventually. And the Supreme Court ruled 5-4, so close decision, in favor of the FCC, holding that the Carlin monologue was, quote, indecent but not obscene. So not obscene language, which can be fully regulated, but just indecent. So the FCC couldn't ban it completely, but could restrict it to only being broadcast at certain times of the day.
Ha, ha, ha.
Yes. And the Supreme Court also said that government regulation of broadcasting content, when in the form of a partial but not total ban, isn't considered censorship. And that's because of the, quote, uniquely pervasive nature of the broadcast airwaves, and that they are, quote, uniquely accessible to children. And so these concerns were sufficient to justify special treatment of indecent broadcasting. So the FCC sanction stood against the radio station.
Well, I can't believe what I'm hearing. The last 3 episodes have been on some fucked up shit, and now we're doing this.
Now we're doing this, and now we're saying shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits. So, there you go.
What episode made a huge difference? If you're hearing this episode, you should go listen to the first 3 first, and then go up to this point. If you went in the other direction, it still wouldn't make sense. So just go in order or something.
Derek, our entire podcast is based around talking about weird shit. Weird folklore, weird history, weird science, weird urban legends. Nothing we talk about makes sense.
I have no clue what the hell's going on, to be honest.
But anyway, that's the case that Janet Rito cited as precedent for the government stepping in and regulating broadcasting. And incidentally, that Communications Act of 1934 is why Art Bell was always so circumspect about allowing people to cuss on his radio program.
Yeah.
That's why he'd beat people out.
Yeah, I mean, Art Bell is legendary. He's a legendary radio host.
Yes. Art Bell, responsible for Coast to Coast AM. Also largely responsible for my interest in weird shit.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. Janet Reno, very insincere about her whole claim that she's not advocating for legislative intervention, and wants to encourage the television programmers to make better decisions about what they decide to program. And then she says this toward the end of her statement. I want to use this forum to challenge television to reduce substantially its violent programming in 1 year's time. Cold turkey would be better, but I want to allow a time period for reasonable transition. In the coming months, I want to work with everyone concerned with this problem to reach out to parents and children and teachers and people in the entertainment industry. We need to proceed soberly and rationally and not succumb to hysteria or slogans on either side, but we must move forward. Not succumb to hysteria or slogans on either side. That is exactly what you're advocating.
I feel like she was like having a medical episode during this sentence because none of that made sense to me.
Okay, it made logical sense from a sense of what she was saying, and that the words weren't just word vomit. But I just think it's really insincere that she ends with, we can't succumb to hysteria or slogans on either side. And exactly what you're doing is feeding the hysteria over violence in media.
That is true. So,
and that also, to me, sounded like a veiled threat against the entertainment industry, especially after referencing the landmark case where the Supreme Court did uphold government intervention in regulation on speech over broadcasting. That was a radio, but that was a radio broadcast, but same broadcasting regulations applying to television. So it sounded like a veiled threat against the entertainment industry that there would be a push for legislative action from the federal government if they didn't comply voluntarily with trying to regulate violent programming, during hours when children might be watching.
Yeah, she sounds like she's just trying to push for it to be family friendly all the time.
Yes, the whole thing seemed, my reading of it seemed very disingenuous.
I would agree with that. That sounded like a bunch of word vomit to me, but at least you made sense of it, because I have no clue what she said.
Mm-hmm. But yes, so this, of course, sparked a debate that you could argue is still continuing today over where you draw the line between what is acceptable regulation of our media by the government and where free speech begins.
I don't know. I'm the wrong person to ask.
Yeah, so there was actually a really good article about it shortly after this issue presented itself in 1994 from the Baltimore Law Review, and I will spare you. I won't read anything of it because only nerds like me find that interesting, but they had a very good analysis on the issues of wanting to be able to regulate media to some degree, but also the First Amendment problems that it poses and the dangers of voluntarily handing over too much of our First Amendment freedom of expression to the government.
Okay.
But this did not go away. Like I said, how that incident of the girl dying in the fire from the boys setting their mobile home on fire.
Yeah.
Even though that came out that was not caused by Beavis and Butthead, that sentiment did not go away. That was still circulating many years after. In a Senate report addressing Senate Bill 772, which was an attempted bill that they tried to pass called the Television Violence Report Card Act of 1995, where basically they wanted the television media outlets to monitor what sort of violent programming they had every year and report on themselves back to the government about it. It was introduced, but it wasn't passed. So people were still referencing that Beavis and Butthead thing. They were talking about how some believe that violent programs, including cartoons, had real-life implications on children, and they said an example of this problem involved MTV's cartoon Beavis and Butthead, which used to air every day at 7 p.m. The cartoon is a parody of two young teenagers and their views of daily life. The two characters engage in what some observers view as irresponsible activity, including cruelty to animals. In particular, the show occasionally has the two characters suggesting that setting objects on fire is cool. It has been alleged that the cartoon's depiction of unsafe fireplay led one 5-year-old in Ohio to set his family's mobile home on fire, causing the death of his 2-year-old sister in 1993. Although MTV denies any connection, it has removed all references to fire for future episodes and has rescheduled the program to 10 p.m. So this is in 1995. This is 2 years later, and they're still believing that Beavis and Butthead was connected to the fire incident.
I just want to know where the animal cruelty part came in. I don't remember any episodes where Beavis and Butthead were throwing animals into a river.
Arguably where Tom Anderson tried to get them to wash his dog and they put it in the washing machine.
Well, that'll do it.
Washing the dog, washing the dog, washing the dog, washing the dog.
I haven't seen that episode, but that seems like what I'm going to look up.
I think that was one of the earlier episodes.
Hey, they technically did wash the dog.
They did wash the dog.
They didn't wash the dog in the right way, but they washed it in the wrong way.
And that exact same quote that I just read to you from that Committee on TV Violence for that bill they were trying to pass in 1995, they took that exact quote in 2000. Another report on a bill called Children's Protection from Violent Programming Act that they tried to pass in 2000. They took that exact same quote that I just read you and recycled it in another report on the committee for that bill.
They sound like
in 2000.
They're just lazy.
Yes, that's just laziness on the part of the Senate, because that is an exact copy of that quote.
Hopefully somebody brought that up and said it's
But-
bullshit.
Yeah, but they were still bringing that up in 2000.
I'm glad that kid came out and said, no, my mother was just an idiot.
Yeah, he didn't get to that in 2008, but yeah, that is insane to me that this happened in 1993, and then in 2000 they were still harping on that one incident,
7
using
years
that
later.
as their anecdotal evidence for the connection between violent programming and actual violence in real life.
Also the year of Y2K.
Yes, 2000 was the year of Y2K.
That could be a whole episode of the people freaking out.
Oh yeah, we can do a whole episode on Y2K.
It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, Y2K was wild. But I mentioned 2 bills that did not pass, but there were a few things that did get passed as a result of all this violence and decency in media fanaticism of the 90s.
Is that why I was watching a creepy mouse as a child because of these bills?
A creepy mouse.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse. I mean, that
Mickey
dude wants
Mouse
you
is
to
a
come
creepy
inside
mouse.
his shack. Like, isn't that a little weird? Think about it.
Okay,
Oh, yeah. These young kids come to my shack. Let's do this.
Oh, Jesus. When you put it like that, yes, it does sound creepy. But Mickey Mouse Clubhouse has been around forever.
Yeah, come inside my clubhouse. I have a whole song, everything. I mean, like, come on, young kids, come into my clubhouse. I mean, it's not supposed to be a Diddy party. So where were we on the bills?
Okay, so yes, we were on legislative acts that were actually passed and actually signed into law. So first we have the Telecommunications Act of 1996. This law required that all new televisions sold in the U.S. include what was called a V-chip, a device that supposedly allowed parents to block programming based on content ratings, and also provided for the development of content ratings for TV. So basically kind of like the G, PG, PG-13 designations for movies, they had to come up with those for TV.
Huh. Did that chip work?
Yeah, now it's TVY, TVPG, and TVMA. You probably still see those designators floating around.
I just have a question. Did those chips, were they effective?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
From what I remember of them, no. No, they were not.
That sounds about right.
Oh, let's see. And then there was the Communications Decency Act of 1996. And the purpose of that was aimed at regulating indecent and obscene material on the internet and other medium platforms. And while it was primarily addressed at online content, the Communications Decency Act was also part of a broader discussion on protecting children from harmful media, including TV.
Yeah, that probably failed.
Hello, Sherman. Our dog Sherman came and joined us. Hello, buddy.
Yeah, that bill probably failed too.
And then there was the TV Parental Guidelines System in 1997. And this stemmed from legislative pressure and industry initiatives to categorize TV based on age appropriateness and flag shows for violence, language, and sexual content. And you still see those labels on TV shows now today.
Yeah, nobody really cares.
And in addition to that new legislation that I talked about, the entertainment industry also started regulating itself a little better, possibly because of fear of more invasive regulation from the government if they didn't regulate themselves a little bit. So like we saw with Beavis and Butthead, where their time slot was adjusted, you saw more of that from the program scheduling, where TV stations would schedule things that were clearly intended for an older, more adult audience later in the evening and keeping programming that was more intended for children on during the day. And networks also began adding warnings and content disclaimers about mature content and don't try this at home, like the one that I read to you from Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, nobody really cares. Just gonna be honest.
Yeah, and they push for those regulations, for those content warnings and guideline designators. And I think, Derek, you can agree with me today that nobody pays attention to them.
No, they're just they're just that extra.
Yeah, they're just there. I don't know of anybody who actually really pays attention.
They're the extra 10 seconds where you can go take a piss and come back in time for the show.
Oh, yeah, that sounds about right. But the debates around the hearings for Beavis and Butthead and other shows highlighted the tension between First Amendment protections and public welfare concerns. And this is still going on today. And now you could even argue that we're seeing almost a repeat of this debate with social media now instead of television.
Yeah, I don't use social media, so I don't know. This is your area.
Yeah, but I would argue that we're really seeing almost a replay of this debate with social media, specifically social media content, and what sort of content is acceptable on platforms like YouTube, and do we have to designate certain channels as not being appropriate for children, and how can certain channels be monetized, and preference for monetization for channels that are aimed at children. And then there's also platform-specific censorship. I remember Twitter before it was bought out by Elon Musk. Twitter actually came under fire for supposedly censoring the input of more conservative views, and it was promoting more liberal views, and that was argued about whether that was appropriate censorship. But that's a whole other debate because Twitter is a private company and not a governmental organization. So First Amendment protections technically only apply to intervention by government entities, not private organizations. They can set their own rules for their content and their behavior. But the case that I was waiting for, which given the makeup of the Supreme Court now I don't see coming, unfortunately, the one I was waiting for was the case where we got the court to decide that certain platforms, because of their ubiquitousness and their prevalence and their use among just so many people, that they now count as public forums and should not be allowed to pick and choose what they regulate and what they promote based on content.
Ooh.
But now, given the makeup of the Supreme Court and the political climate, I don't see that case coming anytime soon. I was waiting for that one for a while, but I think I'll have to wait a bit more for that case to come.
Yeah, you're gonna have to wait.
And so that is the story of why Beavis and Butthead are unlikely advocates for our First Amendment rights. So thank you, Mike Judge. Thank you, Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, thank you for teaching me not to be a dumbass.
Hopefully I taught you not to be a dumbass, and hopefully if you listened to this, you learned a little bit about our First Amendment right as well. And so I'll close it off with another quote from my First Amendment homeboy, Oliver Wendell Holmes. This one from the case Abrams v. U.S. in 1919. Again, a dissenting opinion. The fact that these are dissenting opinions and not the majority opinions make them even more interesting. But here's what he had to say again about our First Amendment. But when men have realized that time has upset many fighting faiths, they may come to believe even more than they believe that, wow, I messed up. Let's try again and pretend I can talk. But when men have realized that time has upset many fighting faiths, they may come to believe, even more than they believe, the very foundations of their own conduct, that the ultimate good desired is better reached by free trade in ideas, that the best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market, and that truth is the only ground upon which their wishes safely can be carried out. That, at any rate, is the theory of our Constitution. It is an experiment, as all life is an experiment. Every year, if not every day, we have to wager our salvation upon some prophecy based upon imperfect knowledge. While that experiment is part of our system, I think we should be eternally vigilant against attempts to check the expression of opinions that we loathe and believe to be fraught with death, unless they so imminently threaten immediate interference with the lawful and pressing purpose of the law, that an immediate check is required to save the country.
Yeah, what she said.
Again, a more eloquent way of saying the clear and present danger test. Unless something is immediately identifiable as dangerous in an immediately identifiable particular way, just because you don't like it is not a reason to restrict someone's freedom of speech.
Yeah,
So there you have it. Hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully we gave you a good laugh today. And the next time you are allowed to express yourself and enjoy your freedom of expression here in America, you can partially thank Beavis and Butthead for that.